Now, I've always worked hard to provide for my wife and 2 kids. We live on a farm we inherited from our grandparents, God rest their souls. We acquired the property shortly after Cindy became pregnant. We were ever grateful since I was in between jobs at the time. My grandparents were farmers, so when we got their land and everything they had with it, it made sense that we keep it going. Growing up, I never visited them very much, and I finally know why my parents kept us away. We moved in late summer, just in time to profit off of the fall harvest. I now wish we had sold the land and just moved. Everything was going great at first. My wife took maternity leave from her job, and I spent my days trying to learn how to do everything that needed done. And it was a weird and amazing feeling to work the land like a real salt-of-the-earth person. Then the harvest came. And after the crops were collected, it appeared my home was surrounded by death, as what remained of the trampled stalks decayed all around. And it was completely natural. But something about an empty cornfield all the way around your home is just unsettling. And as the days grew shorter, I had less time in the day to tend to the rest of the farm. One day in October seemed to be particularly dark, and around 5:30 and 6 o'clock. And I was at the bottom of the hill that our house sat on, right at the edge of the cornfield. Packing up my tools and just getting ready to leave, I heard a crunch, like something walking over the dead corn stalks. And I turned around sharp, but I saw nothing. And it was probably just a trick of the wind, I thought to myself. And I resumed my work, but I didn't get far when I heard something else. It was a sound like no other I've heard ever since. And it reminded me of the way a cat hacks at a fur ball, but significantly louder and deeper. And it initiated a primal fear, one that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Goosebumps raced down my spine as adrenaline gave my chest that tingling sensation as it was dumped into my bloodstream. And I whipped around and caught a glimpse of what I can only describe as a nightmare. And it had a vaguely human shape, but crawled on all fours at an alarming speed. And I saw it only for a brief second, but its skin looked dark gray and hairless. And it was thinner than most people would look. I didn't really get a good look at its head, as right as I turned around, it ducked into some kind of hole. And I dropped the tools I was using and started speed walking back to the house. I don't know if it was instinct or stupidity that kept me from running, but for some reason I felt like if I was to run, it was sure to chase me, like a cat would chase down a mouse. And the walk back felt like an eternity of looking over my shoulder, thinking I would see that thing running after me on all fours. And I was halfway up the hill when I looked back again, and I saw something that made my blood run cold in my veins. And the ground was moving in multiple spots, and as if something buried just beneath the surface was crawling out of the dirt. There must have been 5 or 10 spots like this, and I just stood there, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. A single hand escaping the soil and clawing at the ground was all it took to send me sprinting back the rest of the way to the house. And I didn't look back this time, and fear took over, and I was no longer worried about being chased or potentially caught by whatever creatures were digging their way out of hell and into my cornfield. And I made it back to my house, and I exploded through the quaint white back door. My first thought was of my pregnant wife, so I started yelling for her. And after calling Cindy for a 3rd time, and she answered as she came down the wooden staircase that squeaked with her every step. And she saw panic in my face, and fear flushed hers. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked with worry in her voice. And I thought about what I wanted to say for a moment, knowing I was about to sound crazy. "Honey, I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you, and do your best to believe me." She just stared for a moment. "Okay." And I proceeded into a rambling mess, about these things coming out of the cornfields. When I was finished, she just looked at me, pretty much like you would expect. And she could tell I was truly terrified, so in the end, she said she believed me. I had my doubts, though. We left and spent the next few nights at her mother's house. And we just told her we were having plumbing issues. And eventually, we had to return home. And at least, that's what Cindy said. I was less convinced. We pulled into our driveway, and the house loomed tall over the fields. And everything was quiet, but I knew those fields held dark secrets. And that evening was pretty normal. My wife especially didn't seem too bothered. And I figured this was a pretty good sign that she just thought I was crazy. The next morning, I drove straight to the nearest gun store. I liked firearms, but was never really in a financial position to buy the ones I wanted. I didn't care at this point. I needed to make sure my family was safe. There was no guarantee a gun would even be effective, but I didn't know what else to do. When I walked into the front door with a brand new shotgun, Cindy was instantly angry. We have a baby on the way and are barely making ends meet as it is. The words cut deep because I knew they were true, and I tried to explain to her that it was for our protection. But even as the words were leaving my mouth, I could tell they didn't have the desired effect. I walked back outside, defeated. I hated that she was upset, but she didn't see what I saw. And I took the gun outside, and I walked around for a bit. I don't know what I was trying to achieve, but it made me feel better to think that I was doing something. Nothing happened, and darkness had fallen over my farm. Buying a gun had made me feel more safe, but something about being outside at night gave me this magnetic pull towards my house, as if every cell in my body was screaming at me to go back inside where it's safe. And as I stood on the top step to my porch, and I took one more look over the cornfield, I couldn't see anything, but the fog that settled over the field looked creepy on its own. I couldn't imagine being out there, in the low visibility, on a moonless night, surrounded by whatever those things were that I saw. I made my way inside, where Cindy occupied herself making dinner. And at first, things were real quiet, but eventually conversation came and there was less tension in the air. We ate and went to sleep shortly thereafter. And then just before climbing into bed, I looked out of my second-story window and over the rolling hills of the barren cornfields. I saw nothing, and this was just as chilling as the creatures I saw just days before. Where did they go? And where did they come from? And better yet, what were they? I had no answers and no way of finding any, so I laid down next to my wife, with a million questions still swimming through my head. And I looked to her, and she looked peaceful, lying next to me. And I pushed the thoughts of the monsters that came from my field out of my mind, and went to sleep thinking of my family. And that is, until I heard it. A loud, spiteful growl emanated from the outside. It yanked me from my slumber, and everything was fuzzy at first, the way things are when you awake quickly. And after a few seconds, I thought I might have dreamt it. And that is until I heard a bang come from downstairs. And I couldn't be sure, but it sounded like someone had hit the back door forcefully. And that woke my wife, once again babbling about monsters. And she disregarded me with sleepy spite until the second sound resonated through the house, crashing as glass broke somewhere downstairs. And she shot up in bed, instantly more awake than I had been, and the anger on her face from being disturbed melted into an expression of fear. And as she looked to me, that look from my scared wife was all it took for me to launch myself out of bed and grab my shotgun from the closet. "Where are you going? What are you going to do?" Cindy asked, as if I had an answer. "I'm going to check things out. Stay here and call for help." She picked her phone up, now almost in tears. "Be careful, please." And she picked me. And I looked at her one last time before going downstairs. And after shutting the bedroom door behind me, and I was standing in the hallway above the staircase. Light spilled in from somewhere downstairs. I made my way around the railing, looking down the aged staircase. Moonlight came in through the glass panes on the back door. We never took the time to take the decorations off the walls, so as I descended the stairs, pictures older than myself eyed me with curiosity. Once at the bottom of the staircase, I started looking through each of the rooms until I came to the kitchen. And that's when I saw the state the porch door was in. And the glass was cracked, and when I opened it, I saw deep scratches down its length. Indecision plagued me, and I was filled with white-hot rage at these creatures. I wanted them dead. I wanted to kill every last one of them. How dare they mess with my family? But fear held me in place. A smarter, maybe more primal part of my mind told me not to go outside. It told me to just go back upstairs and wait for the police. And I wish I had listened to that part of me. And after pushing my fear into a dense knot in my stomach, I marched out into the night. And it took a few minutes of walking towards the cornfield before reality hit me. I soon realized I was several hundred yards from my house, surrounded by the very darkness I had earlier loathed, and fog pulled at my feet in swirls. And it wasn't very thick, but it danced around me with a life of its own. And at that moment, I heard movement. Something was moving in the darkness around me, and I wish I hadn't looked for it. Maybe if I had just turned back and went home, everything would have been different. I spun back towards the field, to face the monster I knew awaited me. But I was painfully unprepared for what I saw. And I don't think I'm capable of putting into words what the creature looked like, beyond my earlier description, that is. And even if I could, that image isn't something I wish upon anyone. I no longer think they are creatures born of nightmares, because no human could dream of something this damned. And I personally believe that they are straight from hell, brought to this world by God knows what. It crouched on all fours, staring at me, with a face twisted into an expression of hatred. It hated me for the life that I had, life that it envied. And I don't know what it planned to do, but I didn't want to find out. And I raised my gun to the thing and fired into the night. The muzzle flash was bright and the illumination mitigated my night vision. And suddenly I was unable to see more than a few feet in front of me. Damn it, and I thought. How stupid. And I couldn't tell if I had hit the thing or not. For all I knew, the gunfire could have attracted more of them, and I wouldn't know of their presence until it was too late. And I turned and sprinted for the house, just seconds after I took my shot, my ears still ringing. I couldn't tell if I was being chased or not, and I figured it didn't matter. And I figured it didn't matter anyways. I made it back to the house, slamming the door in my wake, and I busted into my bedroom, where my wife sat in tears on the bed, shutting and locking the door, and I saw she was still on the phone with the police, but instead of a 911 operator sending out officers, an older gentleman spoke steadily on the other end of the line. She put him on speaker so I could hear better. "The Delays place is old, been unchanged for generations. The land there is considered tainted, I guess. The miles of farmland are simply to prevent the area from being developed. And keeping the land in the family has prevented others from moving to the area and discovering its secrets. Evil things are said to stalk these hills, but the only evil I've truly seen comes from those fields after the fall harvest. And it walks the earth every night until the 1st of November. You would do good not to go outside between dusk and dawn. They don't seem too keen on daylight. And I wish you kids the best luck. You're going to need it. This is not a problem the police can help you with." And he hung up. What the hell was that? I asked Cindy. She replied, and I called 911, but when I gave the operator our address, she forwarded me to him. He said he knew the delays, your grandparents. He has a small farm on the other side of the fields, but most of the property was left to you. And I thought about everything that had just happened, and it seemed impossible. But I had already come face to face with the impossible in my backyard. And just then, a small screech cut through the air, shattering the silence that had fallen over the room. And I looked out the window, as I had done earlier in the evening before bed. And what I saw will stay with me forever. One of those wretched things crawled on all fours to the edge of the field, and its head snapped in my direction at once and looked up at me with glowing eyes. I knew it could see me. It knew exactly where I was. Its eyes still full of hatred. It let loose an ear-splitting scream, a sound full of anguish. And suddenly, dozens of others joined in, creating a cacophony of tortured wails in the night. Needless to say, we didn't sleep at all. I sat with the shotgun aimed at the door until the sun rose. The next day, Cindy and I barely spoke. I knew what she was thinking. Neither of us wanted to stay here, but we didn't exactly have the means to leave. And plus, what that old farmer had said, as long as we owned the land, there would remain a field of corn, as opposed to developing into a potential neighborhood where the people would move in and be plagued by the evil that marked this place. And I think that's why we decided to stay for now, despite the things that come with fall.